Elwood City Limits listeners, it's Will, and welcome to the newest episode of Elwood City Limits, the episodic Arthur podcast. Will Young, I guess, as it is. So Lucas, very, very busy at this time of month, but this was an episode that I felt deserved a special guest, and you have probably read the title and know who it is, but in case you haven't, I will save the reveal for after we get through a couple of things here up top. Very quick, like. Please remember to go to vote.thecoast.ca. At this point, when I'm recording this, it is still in nomination period, but it may be in voting very, very soon. Voting is going to be going on from September to October. And of course, if you're not aware, this is to help us rank in the best podcast category. So if you haven't nominated us yet, please do so. If it's voting time, please, hopefully, if we are nominated, vote for us as best podcast. Vote.thecoast.ca. Again, you will need to sign up, and you will need a valid Canadian postal code in order to nominate and probably to vote as well. Patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Patrons, couple releases for you this month. So at the end of the month, Lucas and I will have our newest and last episode of For the Kids, where we will be talking about Mark Brown's follow-up to Arthur. It is called Hop. So that's coming at the end of September. Very excited to talk about this with Lucas very, very soon. And coming next week, patrons, you will be getting a special release that will be coming out for free in about late October, early November. And it has to do with Season 24. We're jumping around a little bit because this is to accommodate Lucas's schedule, but it's going to be a one-of-a-kind video. And so patrons will have access to that next week. If you're on the free feed, you will have to wait a little bit longer before you're able to see it. Patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Support us over there, and thank you to everybody who does. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to take a moment to thank a couple of our patrons, starting at the top of my list here from those who maybe haven't heard it in a little while. I want to say thank you to John Griswold, Ross Ward, Michaela Gibson and Rachel Pearson, Valeria and Nicholas DeMarco, Aurora Borealis and Gabs, RPG Fiend, Jenny Cardenas, Mamata, and Alicia. Thank you to Marco and Purple Stars 2006, to Ashmita and Aaron L. Thank you to Chris Tar, and thank you to Jenna/Jen. Make sure to stick around for the next episode of Elwood City Limits, which will be coming your way in just a couple of weeks when Lucas makes his return. We are going to be talking about the final episode of Arthur Season 23. That's The P and the Princess and DW and Doctor Who's It. Join us for that one, and then the Season 23 recap will not be far behind. And of course, if you'd like even more content, including those to fill out the gap weeks, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. Now, let's get on to today's episode. All right, so in the middle of Season 23 here, listen, I know we're limited on episodes in this season, but the truth of it is that this is one of the busy times of year for one Lucas Mancini. And, I mean, initially I was like, well, let me give him a little bit of relief because the episode that we're talking about today, right in the middle of Season 23, is all about Ladonna and Bud. So I figured, yeah, maybe he won't be like super duper jazzed about this to start off with. So while Lucas is very busy, I thought that this would be a great opportunity to have a guest back who was here earlier this year, kind of midway through the year actually. And she was, I think, very well received by many of you listeners, and this is a great opportunity. When I saw that this episode was coming up and I kind of understood what it was about, I think this actually is a great part 2 to some of the discussion that we had previously this year on Elwood City Limits. So everybody, welcome back my guest for this episode, Genna. Hey, Genna.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, and we're happy to have you back. And when I kind of saw, this is the double episode of this season, and it's all about Ladonna, and not just Ladonna. This is diving into the military family aspect of her, which is something that in the last episode that you were a part of, something that you responded quite strongly with initially.
Yeah, I had a lot of thoughts about the way that military life was represented in that earlier episode. But this one is even though it has the same content, it's about the same topic, it's from a different perspective. It is really laser focused on what this is like for the children.
Yes.
And so I think pulls it off better than the first run at that topic that we had. This is all about what it's like to be a kid when your family has to move on short notice.
Right, because one of the things that we talked about back in episode 235, you can go check it out on the free feed or on our YouTube channel, is that you were talking about like representations of the military, especially in media made for children. And I'll be very interested to kind of get back into it because this is, I think, even more direct in a sense than what we talked about before. It is very much meant for the specific audience of children with in military families.
Yeah, or even friends of those kids.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Because it's all about like the response that your social circle and your community has to make when there's this upheaval like this.
Yeah. So the episode we're talking about is When Duty Calls. It is a double episode. I think it's it's the last new double episode. There's one coming up in season 24 that that's a whole other thing. But yeah, this is basically the last double episode of the series, I think. You know what? I should really look this up really quick because sometimes I say things and they might not be 100% true. I don't have the most accurate recall like someone like Peebs. This is the last original double episode of the series. And we're starting off, this was a surprise. I knew this was about Ladonna. I figured it would be from her perspective, but no, our perspective character for this episode is Fern. And this was another great opportunity because I don't believe that you got to see Fern in the episode that we talked about. And I mean, if there is a character that is beloved by children who learn to read at an early age, besides Arthur, it's got to be Fern. The poet, the writer. Oh, yeah. I mean, Fern's a favorite of Lucas and mine. She's a favorite of listeners to this show, of Arthur fans. Just generally speaking, from this episode, what did you think of Fern?
I had such warm feelings toward Fern as well. We don't see that much of Fern's personality necessarily here, other than the storyteller, right? The bard of the group.
Yes.
And she had her foil. Her and Ladonna together were the storytellers of the group. They were the storyteller and the sidekick, or the comic relief. Like, they really had established this dynamic. Mm-hmm. And I remembered that I always told people when I was younger that one of my favorite characters was Fern, but I couldn't really recall why.
Yeah.
'Cause I haven't really watched Arthur as an adult. And I did grow up to be a writer, a creative person, and so that must have been part of why I felt such a kinship with Fern. And I love the tradition of the kids creating a story together. And then we see it animated, which is such a fun touch and really nicely brings in that opening sequence with what's actually going on in the story.
Mm-hmm. So the episode starts out with the typical cold open where Fern is in the middle of exploring what she calls a new frontier with Ladonna. It's this like frozen tundra in the middle of a snowstorm. And so she's reminding us what we need when we're exploring a new frontier. So the right clothes, a trusty compass, and to stay connected and tie yourself to something familiar. But as she's talking about tying yourself to something familiar, Ladonna steps outside of the tent and gets swept away on an ice floe. So that's really the setup for what's going on for the rest of this episode.
And they have this abrupt, sad ending. The first time you watch them, this like colonial imagery, these two explorers that are in a tent in sort of Lewis and Clark, but Fern and Ladonna, and they just they're doing a little reading at the library. Once again, unsupervised. Adults, MIA. They're having an unsupervised, unsanctioned library program at the library.
Fiction Friday, it's called.
Fiction Friday. Is Fiction Friday a thing, or is it made up for this episode?
I imagine it's made up, but it's pretty generalized that I can't imagine that it's not in some degrees. Like, you know, you put in Fiction Friday, Fiction
Maybe it's a
Fridays
thing.
at
Yeah.
okay, that's a nightclub in Toronto, so you could go to Fiction Fridays if you wanted to. That's more up your alley.
Fiction Friday is just me reading my Kindle on any given Friday. But yeah, no, they're going to this library program, and Ladonna is processing what's going on.
Yes.
By putting this, she's preparing herself for an abrupt, sad ending.
Yes.
By putting an abrupt, sad ending into the story. But I think she intended an abrupt, sad separation, and then Fern comes in with, and then you're gonna die!
Yeah.
You're gonna go over the cliff! Bye!
What you're referencing is the fact that Fern and Ladonna are co-writing a fiction series together called The Dirigibles Daughters. And it's a clear self-insert. I mean, they're 8 years old. It's fine. About LaFauna and Vern, two sisters who ride around in a dirigible, as we see in the cold open. And we even get a little reference here to the fact that Arthur and Buster have done this same co-writing earlier in the series. And in fact, that was part of the episode in, I believe that was season 2 or 3, where Buster leaves to go off with his dad. And it's referenced later in this episode because much earlier in the series, Buster went with his dad, who is a pilot, and for I want to say it was like the summer or around about there, on a trip to a bunch of places in Europe and all over the world. And that was a big thing that tied him and Arthur together, is that they were writing a story together. And then once Buster left, it seemed like they wouldn't be able to continue that story anymore. But much as we do later in this episode, there is a way to keep it going. Before they do their reading, Muffy has her own reading, which is called A Thanksgiving Tragedy, and it's complete with sound effects. So it's all about how something to the effect of like there was a store closed on Thanksgiving and real first world problems for Muffy.
I thought that was so funny because we once again have Muffy and her tablet, right?
Yes.
Like,
yeah,
never to be parted. And Muffy's like proto-influencer arc is so interesting to me because I'm trying to figure out what it is that why we're being shown this, what we're being told about Muffy.
Yeah.
And that Muffy, unlike some of the other characters where we see them process things from the past and grow, Muffy seems a little bit stuck. Muffy is really shallow. And this is still really similar to like season 1, 2 Muffy with her big closet.
Yeah.
It's just that this time her shallowness is kind of channeled through technology. And we see that a little bit later in the episode. And I think it's a little comic relief. It's a little foil to the epic sad story that's taking place with Ladonna and Fern. But Muffy's just like chronic inability to read the room, like chronic inability to like pick up on the mood is so interesting. Like maybe Miss Muffy a little bit neurodivergent. You know, she's just a little bit slower to pick up on things than other people, or she isn't always the best at reading social cues. And I thought that was a little bit funny.
Well, and Muffy is the character who always is given the character growth moments because she starts from the space that, unlike some of the other characters who start off very like positive and likable, she is not likable when the show starts, and often that's kind of where her growth comes in. And that's kind of the Simpsons syndrome of like Muffy can only grow so much, of she has to revert somewhat back to normal by the end of an episode. So it feels like she's constantly learning these lessons, and she's good for that. We've actually like had a podcast wide arc where we came around on several characters, including Muffy, and she gets some really good episodes. But you're right, that's kind of her thing, is that she you took a spin to it. I think it is meant to be like, you know, affluenza.
Yes.
You know, she's so rich that she doesn't have to worry about other people, whereas you interpret it more as under the neurodivergent lens, which is something that you and I think are very tempted to do with any media that we consume. I do it all the time.
Yeah, it's true. It might be a little bit of projecting. And what's actually happening is they're resetting Muffy at the beginning of the episode so she can learn a lesson again.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
I also wanted to say, so this is actually a new design for the Elwood City Library, which got an upgrade just a couple of seasons before this. The Crosswires actually paid for the library to be basically remodeled. So this is a room that we've never seen before where they're doing this reading, and it looks very much designed like a modern library, or at least like the downtown library in Halifax, I think, has a lot of this kind of very open space, inviting colors and designs for all ages. So I thought it was really neat to see this part of the library that we just probably didn't have before. That
the Crosswires
yeah.
bought those new computers, the flat screen computers. They don't have those chunky 90s computers that they had in the last episode that I watched. They've got these sleek computers, courtesy of Muffy's, car dealership Dynasty, and they have this sick conversation pit where they're doing the reading. It looks so cozy.
That was rad. It was very 60s.
I know. I was like, oh, make me one of those. My grandparents had a conversation pit in their home around the fireplace, and I love it. Nice. I love it. I've always wanted one, and I think they're amazing in public space.
I don't think I've been in one before, but I would really like to. As you mentioned, Ladonna participates in the reading, and she gives a very abrupt and unsatisfying end to the Dirigible Sisters. And Fern feels that it might be because something is wrong. And of course, Ladonna says as much, that she doesn't have time to work on it because she and her family are moving to Oregon next week. But she's very cool. She's very cool. She's very like, yep, that's the way it is. I got to go do more packing, so I'll see you later. Like, no emotion behind it, just like very matter of fact. And
it's legitimately unsettling. It does exactly what it needs to do, which is like, oh yeah, we're having a massive life event. I'm not going to see you again. Bye.
Just and I, I'm familiar with that response in my own life of just like, oh yeah, that's she's just fully cutting herself off from the emotion of everything because it's just easier to do in this moment.
Yeah, I thought that was really a great showing moment rather than telling us how we're supposed to feel. And we see the kids kind of respond being like, oh, something's not right. I also really noticed, I'm sure you've seen this before too, that Ladonna's accent comes in and out a little bit.
Oh boy, does it ever.
it came in so hard when she's doing like I got more packing to do than Santa Claus. And you're like, oh my God. I don't even remember you having an accent in the last one that I watched, and it's just suddenly the full Southern drawl.
Well, we also get into the accent of it all because the B plot of this episode has to do with Ladonna's little brother Bud, who is also going to be leaving for Oregon. And so he's saying goodbye to DW. He wants to make sure not to forget, and he's that very kind of 4-year-old finality of like goodbye forever. And DW at first professes to be fine to her dad when he asked, and just kind of is just like, yeah, whatever, it's cool. And in a very, like, there's some well-observed moments in this episode. So, like we were just talking about with Ladonna's unemotional reaction is that DW puts up a front until Bud leaves, and then she starts sobbing. She's very
wailing.
upset because this does make sense. There's a relationship in this episode that doesn't, I think, make a lot of sense if you've been watching before this, but this definitely does because Bud is DW's new best pal. Like he is the number 2 to her in all of her stories, or when he gets a story, DW's next to him. So they became very close friends very quickly. So this and Dad Reed says that DW can write him letters, but DW can't read or write. So
I can't. Yeah,
and she's like sobbing. And there's a few moments in this episode of characters in tears, which is rare. We see characters in Arthur sad a lot, but like outwardly crying is actually quite rare.
I was wondering about that. I was wondering a few things. One being like, I know that Bud is not everybody's favorite character.
He is some people's though. Some people do like him, but Lucas and I don't have a lot of time for him.
But I had a little theory about why they don't show crying that much.
Yeah.
Which is that it doesn't look right on the animation.
A little bit.
The water, it doesn't look right. It's like something about it doesn't quite hit. You see it, you understand. Like, I think if you're a kid, you watch it, you see that they're in tears. But when I watch it, I'm like, where's the water coming from? It looks weird. It's so blue. Like, it just doesn't look right.
And really, I don't know if it ever even looked all that great when Arthur was hand animated. I can think of like a handful of times where somebody literally cries tears, and it is just like, you're right. I think it is hard to make it look good if you're on a certain budget. Like, to make it look natural. And then, like, I think anime will get around that by like exaggerating it to a degree.
Yes, the dramatic. Yeah.
But yeah, like it struck me, yeah, because it's like, oh, we don't see Arthur characters cry very much, and then it's also just like, oh, all of a sudden, big huge puddles in the eyes, and it's like,
yeah, and they're also puddles that are not resting on anything because they don't really have
they're like
3D faces.
Yeah, their definition in their upper
they're floating.
Cheeks. Yeah,
it doesn't look great. Yeah, actually, a long time ago, I watched a documentary about VeggieTales, and Phil Vesser says that the entire reason why when they went to do that they did Joan and the Whale for their full-length animated picture. Mm-hmm. They wanted to do Noah's Ark, but they could not get the water right.
Yeah.
They cannot get water is really hard to animate. And there is water in the Joan and the Whale one, but it's pretty brief. Like, you kind of see it and then you're inside the whale. And water in any animation medium, I think it takes a lot of skill. It's very subtle because I think fluid moving around a 2D like landscape, it's just so hard to make it work, and I never appreciated that until I saw the floating tears.
Yeah,
unless you doesn't quite work
unless you have like a huge budget, which these Arthur episodes do not.
Certainly don't.
They make the most. They make the most of the program that they have, but it's just like and you gotta like just keep going. So it's like they're gonna look the way they look to some degree. Bud's little comfort stuffed animal is Rapti, who is also his imaginary friend, and Lucas especially has even less time for Rapti than Bud. Rapti is very annoying to Lucas, and he's just kind of like he will grow into like a full-size T-Rex. He's just like, hey, Bud, like, what's going on? Like, I'm Rapti. Very Barney-esque. But we find out that this Rapti is actually Rapti 2.
He's an imposter.
Yes. And it's, like Snowball 2 in The Simpsons. It's because the original Rapti Bud left behind when his family were leaving Guam. And I just thought it was interesting because Ladonna and Bud have the kind of every Southern accent at the same time thing, but it's like they have actually been all over the world, including to Guam, which I'm glad that Guam got a shout out here.
It has a real military base, very large military base in Guam.
Oh, there you go.
So that is real.
Okay.
Yeah, huge. Yeah, so like it makes like sense. If the U.S. military in Arthur world is similar to the U.S. military in the real world, then there's a huge base of aardvark defense forces on Guam. But yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Yeah, I think you told me that they're meant to be from New Orleans. I don't think it sounds like a New Orleans accent particularly.
Well, and so I hate to bring this up 2 weeks in a row because I think that she's a bit overexposed as it is, but I was literally saying on the last episode to Lucas that I was watching the trailer for Haley Welch's new podcast, the Hoptua Girl, and she sounds like she's from Texas, and Bud sounds a lot like her. Like if you close your eyes watching that trailer or any podcast clip, and just think of Bud in the chair with the hat and everything, of just like it kind of fits. Honestly,
now I'm thinking of Bud and Rapti co-hosting a podcast.
Ugh, no. Please no.
Yeah, oh my goodness. Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, it's just like they are nominally, like they lived in New Orleans at some point. I think that just when they were learning vocabulary, they probably lived somewhere in, around Texas or Georgia or something.
Yeah, somewhere in the deep south. They got that drawl.
Yeah, I agree, like the New Orleans is a hard accent to do for actors generally. So it's like, I don't know why you would start them there if you're just going to do like Southern accent Yeah, I know. They throw in a few like New Orleans touchstones like the jambalaya a little bit later. Yeah. So like you're giving them a bit of flavor, I guess, like a distinctiveness, but yeah, the accent doesn't quite work, and it's especially unsettling coming out of Bud's mouth saying morbid things. Like he says goodbye forever. Goodbye forever.
And he goes, thank you for being DW's dad, which is such a weird thing to say.
Yeah, he gives him a little puppy dog eyes before he goes.
It took me right out of it. I was like, this is dark. This is a traumatized child. I thought that was like both interesting and also unsettling.
So Fern and the gang are concerned that Ladonna doesn't seem to be upset that she's leaving, and they're trying to figure out why. So they do this little experiment with Buster, who again, he has the experience of having to leave his friends behind. So they do a sense memory experiment to evoke the memory of how he felt when he left. And they do this by having him eat the ice cream flavor that he was eating at the time. Now this is okay. So we're at the Brain's mom's ice cream shop, and the Brain keeps a written record of everyone's favorite ice cream over the years. Now, I will remind you, this all happened when they were 8 years old. They're 8 years old in this episode. They were 8 years old in season 2. This is like the longest year of anybody's life, essentially.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, I'm guessing, like, I don't know, October.
6 months ago.
Yeah, 6
but
months
he
ago.
says years ago. He says years ago.
He does say years ago, and it's like...
I think he actually says 4 years ago, but I might have misheard.
Well...
But, like, that makes no sense.
I do remember him being like, yeah, years ago. And it's just like, well, yes, technically, that episode aired in, like, 1998. But for you, it was, 6 months ago. This is the longest third grade of anybody's life. So the flavor... So Brain thinks that it is... Buster's favorite flavor at the time was Butter Ripple Toffee Swirl, which sounds good to me.
A normal sounding ice cream.
I like it. But Arthur disagrees because he remembers the week that Buster left very well because he said he was really upset. So it's like it's a trauma memory for Arthur. He says it was actually pickles and peppermint ice cream. And Buster's like, that was it.
And it's the most saturated hunter green, like, implausible color ice cream. There's enough food dye in there to make the FDA knock down your door.
Yeah, it's
so wrong.
It's pretty like green, bold, but that is the one that is the correct flavor. And Buster remembers that when he gets the sense memory of that when he was leaving, he was afraid his friends would forget him. And another earnest moment here. We've had a lot of tears in this episode. Yeah. And we get Arthur and Buster giving each other a hug and being like, "Oh, you're my best friend." And there's no like joke behind it. And I just thought that was sweet. I thought that was really nice.
I love to see that with boys, especially.
Yeah. I really liked it. So that's what they're going on, is they think that Ladonna is worried that they will forget her. So that's in A. Then we hop back over to B, where Dad Reed is helping DW write a letter to Bud, but so she's dictating, and she can't get the wording quite right. She can't get past "Dear Bud." How are you doesn't really fit.
I love the thing where she's like, I would never say, how are you? If I say, how are you, they're going to know it's you.
So she's thinking of like other methods that she can use besides writing something. So maybe it's her dad is making jambalaya for Bud, like you said, of a New Orleans dish as a goodbye gift. So she tries putting some in an envelope and immediately understands
doesn't work.
No. The other thing she tries is that she does an outline of herself on like a large piece of, I don't know, construction paper or something, but that also won't
CSI style.
Yeah. But that won't fit in an 8x11 envelope, so it's not that's not going to work. Back in A, Muffy gets everybody gets the idea that they can write. First of all, they think that they'll write down their favorite memories of Ladonna. Yeah. But then Muffy says, well, why don't we embrace technology and create a video of everyone's memories of Ladonna? And they eventually show it to her at a goodbye party. We get this montage of Muffy filming everybody with their memories. She pockets a bit of onion so that Brain can cry legitimate tears.
Yeah, we once again have Muffy being an agent of disinformation. We have Muffy making manipulated media. This is the second episode I've watched where Muffy is manipulating media.
It's true, because when we see the movie that she made later, the editing is very disingenuous, cutting around people's remarks, and she really overdoes it on the effects as well. So it's not just like manipulative media in the sense of like controlling the narrative, but it's also just like junky
over-edited
consumerist media of just like
cap cut.
Oh yeah, we've all done that. We've all gone crazy on the effects. You know, when I was 14 making wrestling music videos, I'm like, let's flip, let's change the color, let's do the
PowerPoint transitions.
When we learned how to do PowerPoint in school and you realized you could put sound effects and transitions, like unreadable, unwatchable. Yeah.
This gives you a seizure.
The drum roll as it goes around. Yeah. So, I mean, the movie itself is not great, but it still has everybody's memories. By the way, the movie is called Who Will Remember Ladonna? And that got a big laugh out of me. Because
so
I was reading
grim.
I was reading it in a less generous
in a metatextual way where it's like, not me personally, like Ladonna's not that memorable,
or for the wrong reasons.
I haven't seen every episode of this season, full disclosure, but like she grew a personality for me only in this episode where like, oh, she's the storyteller. Her personality is that she tells stories and that she over explains things in like a cute way, but I don't remember her doing that in the last episode that I watched.
That is when we established her in the show, that was kind of her trait. That's her trait, and we return to it when we need to, but it's not there all the time. It's there enough that like, yeah, I believe that. So yeah, I think they did eventually come around to that. That is part of her character. It's just not as omnipresent as like Buster loves food and conspiracy theories sort of thing.
Yeah, and the brain is smart. Yeah, the rest of them have the benefit of a 20-year run and solidifying into these archetypes.
Yeah. So Ladonna does seem affected by the video. Like we see her like leaving very quickly. She brought her rat, General Higgins, with her because he's wants to see all of the sights of Elwood City, and that's kind of, she is doing that, but it's also her excuse to leave early. Because we can tell watching as adults that like she is becoming emotional at the thought of leaving, and she doesn't want to confront those emotions. And as she's leaving, very affected with tears in her eyes, she says that she's not worried about being forgotten, which everybody thought was the thing. And like I said, rare tears from Ladonna. As Ladonna leaves, Fern is crying, which is odd. And I mean, I say this, I had this note later, but I might as well say it now. It's like, this is the first time that I think Fern and Ladonna have like interacted with each other on the show.
Oh, really? So they're retconning this friendship
a little bit. And it's just, I think Fern is meant to be representative of everybody's friendship with Ladonna.
Yeah.
I would say if she was closest friends with anybody, it would probably be Arthur. Maybe like Francine or somebody, but like you see her the most with Arthur, and I genuinely don't think Fern has ever interacted with her. I could be wrong about that, but like
there's all this offstage where we're relying on the fact that they've written many chapters of this story together before, and we just haven't seen them. Yeah, we just weren't around for Fiction Friday.
I can let it go because it is meant to be representative of everybody, and you maybe just don't want to animate every single character in every single shot. So it's whatever. It's whatever.
Yeah, it works for this.
Yeah.
There's a lot to dig into here. I wonder if this lesson, there's just a lot of steps of thinking for you to get to understand where the kids went wrong here. Mm-hmm. Because they do this magic potion seance process with the ice cream. And they're like, let us divine what is happening with Ladonna. Like, let me get my ice cream. Let me, like, tap into my subconscious. Mm-hmm. And they're really trying to emphasize here that this is how empathy works, right? You have to get into the headspace and try to understand what the person is thinking. But they go way too far down that road, and they don't just talk to her. There's like you can't really empathize with someone if you don't really communicate with them to understand what's going on. I'm not entirely sure there's like enough there for kids to figure out that's what happened. Right. I thought it was interesting that it was kind of like the limits of just empathy. You also have to communicate. And then they end up with this huge misfire. And Ladonna doesn't have a fear of being forgotten. Well, she has a fear of losing their friendship in the future.
Well, and I think that I agree. I can see why they kind of leapt to this in terms of like doing their own research, because you can divine as the viewer that like Ladonna probably wouldn't be interested in talking about that, or she would avoid talking about it. But you're right, there was no attempt, I think, to just try asking that way.
Yeah.
First.
It probably wouldn't have got anywhere. So it's understandable. It's kind of interesting, but it was a little bit indirect, which is okay. Not every part of a kid's show has to hit you over the head.
Yeah.
I also want to know if there's any lore I need to be caught up on General Higgins. Is General Higgins new to this episode?
I forgot he existed. He did. So General Higgins has been introduced before this. He's Ladonna's pet. Like, I think...
Yeah.
Like I said, I kind of forgot that he existed. So right now I'm just heading over to the Arthur wiki. Oh God, right. So we finally recently got rid of the dog and baby episodes. And that was
the notoriously despised dog and baby episode.
So yeah, he was introduced in Ladonna's first episode, and then he had a feature in a episode in season 17. Whatever. It's just in this episode he really takes on, like, I would say, I guess just generally the pet sidekick role, because he does a lot of emoting for Ladonna and is sort of her moral compass, and it's just like General Higgins and Ladonna this is not a thing. This is not like an Arthur and Pal thing. This is like he's in two episodes before this.
It's so uncomfortable to me. Bunny having a pet rat is not right. Not that Aardvark having a pet dog is right. Like, that's not right. But the way he's animated and he runs on 4 legs, he's little. Like, he's the wrong size. Like, Mr. Ratburn is a rat. Mr. Ratburn is a rat, but General Higgins is a rat. And the way it's animated reminds me of those 90s shows, or even like the Paula Abdul videos where every listener is too young to remember this.
Cool Cats?
Yes, it's like a human with a animated animal with them.
Oh,
That's
sure.
the energy that I get off of it. Because he's like moving and talking, not talking, like making little rat noises like a rat. He squeaks and he's tiny. And he just the way the animation is too, like he's not interacting with the environment quite right. Like he kind of seems like he's floating on her shoulder rather than sitting on her shoulder.
Right.
And it is so weird. I know that I'm supposed to suspend my disbelief about them being animals. And they constantly draw your attention away from that. It's not like Little Bear or other kids' cartoons where it's like the bird character eats worms.
Yeah.
You know? No, they all sit at the table together and eat spaghetti. Even like they're all different species, right? Like you're not supposed to pay attention to the fact that they're animals. For all intents and purposes, they are human. But something like this just brings me out of that. Like the contrast of when now you have an animal that like walks on 4 legs and acts like an animal. And it has me really questioning and thinking about why they are animals at all. Why are the characters animals? Why didn't they just make them humans? They don't do any animal stuff. I think it's just for visual interest. Maybe it's just to make the characters distinct. But like they don't do any animal thing. And they live in a human society, and it sends me for a spiral every single time.
You just got animal hierarchy, Genna. Welcome to the struggle that we've had for 8.5 years on this show.
I know. It's like you could talk it to death and you'll never get anywhere because the answer is don't think about it.
Yeah. And I think that you pretty much have it in terms of like as we've mentioned before, the idea in making them animals is yes to make them distinct, is that they're more interesting designs. I think it's also to make them universal in a way that making them humans is would be a bit more difficult, and of course
they don't have a race or anything,
right? Yeah. And I think that Mark Brown and the people who work on Arthur welcome people to project whatever background that they desire onto those characters, because they don't have race; they have a species essentially. But yeah, you're right. It's trust me, we've all had we've had hours and hours of podcast discussions about it. So, but hey, like this. I think every one of our guests has struggled with it in one way or another. And I mean, it seems like LaDonna and General Higgins never agree, because she likes the movies and he likes TV.
Okay.
I just like that Paula Abdul song. I love that video. So
I don't remember the song. I just remember her.
Okay, you got to listen to the song when we're done.
I just remember her like scooting around with her animated animal friends.
It's just her and I said Cool Cat. It wasn't Cool Cat. It was MC Skat Cat. So you got to watch that video when we're done. That song is a banger.
I don't think I've seen it since about 1995.
Well, it's high time that you saw it again. Is what I'm saying.
It is. All right.
So yeah, we go from this. This is the act break. And now a word from us kids.
And now a word from us kids.
This is where we are directly dealing with the issue at hand with 9-year-old London. It's one of the A Word From Us kids where we're dealing with one kid instead of a class. So London is part of a military family. Her mom, Ashley, and her parents, Chevy, who look a bit too close to my age for comfort. Thank you very much. So London is talking about what it's like to be in a military family. She has moved from North Carolina to New York, back to North Carolina, and then to Massachusetts in her 9 years of life. And she talks about what she does to kind of calm herself down when times are tough. So she likes to draw, she likes to play violin, she likes to learn boxing with her dad. And it's meant to be a positive message for kids in this situation of like, don't be nervous when you're moving or about making friends. Like, be who you are and you will make friends no matter where you go. And I will say that I think London is a great host. Every once in a while we come across these kids in the Word From Us Kids segments that are like made for the camera. She's very bubbly, she's very confident, and it was a really great little segment. But of course, like, I would love to know how this struck you.
I think it achieves what it's setting out to do so much more successfully and in a more uncomplicated way than the earlier Word From Us Kids segment where we saw the military family and we saw the reunion with the deployed parent, and we also saw some lines put in the child's mouth about how my dad protects the country and other things that lean more toward fitting the definition of propaganda.
Right.
And this isn't that. We don't hear anything about the military other than that they move around and that her dad is an officer in the army. And this is just about the kid's life. And we only see her at home. We see her doing hobbies at home. And I think the sort of underlying message there is like, wherever you go, you're going to, if you have things you enjoy, you'll be able to do those things wherever you're going. And they talk about making friends, but we don't see other children, probably because it just wasn't practical to film that. So I thought that this worked a lot better and was probably a little bit easier to relate to for kids watching. Because kids watching just aren't going to have that much knowledge about like what the military is or why it matters or the meaning of it. Like that's probably going to go over kids' heads. And this is a lot more like you're just seeing the everyday life of a child. I also noticed, did you pick up that there's a sign in her room that says sister?
No.
So there's another child somewhere.
No, I did.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that. Good eye.
It could be that one of her parents has an older child. It could be that maybe the mom's pregnant or something, but we never see the other child.
Okay. No, I totally missed that.
So for some reason, the other child isn't there. You know, but yeah, I agree that she's so good on camera. It is so hard. Like I've tried to do it before for work, like interviewing kids and getting tape that is meaningful and also comes across as natural.
Yes.
Incredibly hard to do.
Oh yeah.
With kids that young. And they pull it off really well.
We've seen the gamut in Word From Us Kids of every type of kid who is for every level of comfort in front of the camera. So you can it really stands out when you have a kid who is ready to be essentially a performer. And at least in this context, and it's always very welcome because not to be we always be nice when we have Word From Us Kids, but it's just
children. Yeah,
in the 25 years of Arthur, some of those kids are real duds in front of the camera. Which is okay. Like they're clearly like performing is not their strong suit. It's not everybody's strong suit. But in this case,
ask anybody with kids about trying to get them to say anything specific on video or get a particular picture. Like there's a reason that it's like a specialty thing. Yeah. Like people who are good at filming kids are really good at filming kids. But yeah, I thought that it did exactly what you wanted it to do. It took the Ladonna story and made it sort of real.
Yeah.
I think and you see that she's moved often and we see the little kids drawing of the country and her moving around, and I thought that was pretty effective.
Well, and I'm really glad that you got to see basically the other side of where we kind of left off in the last episode that you were part of.
Yeah.
So it presents a fuller picture of what PBS Kids and the Arthur production is going for with these types of things, and it does leave you feeling a little better than what we talked about last time.
Yeah, definitely.
Hi, everybody. It's Lucas, your favorite co-host from Elwood City Limits. I want to remind you folks that if you like listening to the podcast, first and foremost, the best way to spread the love is to tell a friend who is interested in Arthur or podcasts or animation or hearing about Nova Scotia for some reason. But there's some other things you could do as well. For instance, you can follow us on social media. Twitter is at ECL Podcast. The Instagram is at Elwood City Limits. My pet project, the Twitch channel, which we do live streams on sometimes, twitch.tv/Elwood City Limits Pod. And we also have a Facebook and Tumblr as well. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and youtube.com/Elwood City Limits. That's where Will has been diligently uploading all of the episodes if they're not on your podcast listening service of choice. If they aren't on one of those services, let us know. You can reach out to us on social media or via email at elwoodcitylimits@gmail.com. Finally, the Patreon is where you can find all of our paywall content, patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. This gives you access to the Discord, where we have a bustling community, as well as some exclusive videos, audio bonuses, such as commentary for the various Arthur movies and more, as well as some of our additional podcasts. For the kids is where me and Will cover all the PBS shows that aren't Arthur, as well as ECL Origins, where we really talk about any show from our childhood that we want. And most importantly, you get early access to every episode of ECL. You get to flex on your friends that you're getting it a week early. You can join for as little as $1 a month at patreon.com/Elwood City Limits. And now, back to the show.
And now, back to Arthur.
So the second part of the episode, we left it with Ladonna running away and Fern running after her. So Fern does end up finding Ladonna near a creek of sort of like a viaduct overhang, and Fern directly asks Ladonna what's wrong, and this is where we get the explanation here. So Ladonna talks about how when her family was stationed in Guam, she had her best friend at the time, whose name was Tony or Noni.
In my head, I keep calling him Tony Baloney.
Tony Baloney. Listen, I'm sure he must have gotten that. I mean,
oh yeah, it's right there.
Not that I want kids to be bullied. farthest from it, but it's just like it really does lend itself to like Tony or Noni to just taunting. Anyway, maybe in a way he might have deserved a bit of taunting when we hear about this story. So Tony or Noni in Guam, best friends with Ladonna, threw her a party when she was leaving. And then they said that they would write to each other. Ladonna wrote 3 letters to him, and he never wrote back. And she does give him a little bit of an out. She says that, she said, my mom says that sometimes people just get busy, and it's not because they don't like you. But she never heard from Tony or Noni again. And this is what she holds in her heart with Fern and the Elwood City kids. When they say that they want to stay in touch, she doubts it, and she's like, "I've been burned before." And this is
good reason.
This is totally realistic. Like, I totally
100% real,
empathize and understand. And we even return to this in a dream that Fern has later. But maybe I'll wait for that. But yeah, this is where we get the full on explanation between friends, allegedly best friends or something like that, Fern and Ladonna. So that's the reason why she's upset
falling out
and
of touch
acting
is
the way
so
she is.
real.
Yeah.
And with kids, it is kind of out of sight, out of mind. It's totally believable that something like this could happen. I thought that was really effective.
Again,
they had this kind of notebook thing where it's like, you didn't answer my letters.
I mean, again, very well observed, behavior that a child would have.
Yeah. Absolutely.
This is visited further when Fern has a dream that night, because they leave it in kind of an uncertain place. Ladonna is sure that her friends here will not stay in touch, and Fern returns to the cold open, essentially, when Ladonna was floating on the ice floe. Except here in her dream, Ladonna is saying, like, don't worry about it, like, I'll be okay, as she's about to go over a waterfall. So Fern pilots the dirigible above her and throws her down a rope. But Ladonna doesn't want to take it, because she's like, well, maybe, like, you might take the rope away. Like, you might not hold on to the rope. And then
I don't trust it.
Fern demonstrates it by wrapping the rope around herself and being like, I'm not going anywhere. And they manage to save her from going over a waterfall. And this is what gives Fern the inspiration to do what the end of the episode shows them doing. And in the B plot, Arthur is a bit late to the thing that the kids get up to the next day because DW says that he is helping her learn to read and write, and he's like, I can't
do that.
I can't teach you that in one day. So instead, Arthur is going to write down something on a piece of paper, and DW will just copy it. But he's a little bit late to do this whole plan. That Fern's idea that we don't hear about in full at first is that they are going to use technology again to stay in touch with Ladonna. And again, it's worth noting that when we had a similar episode like this in season 2 with Buster leaving, that was in the era of dial-up internet and phone calls and letter writing. So Buster kept up with Arthur through postcards, and they would mail each other their story. So a lot of mail, and it's just like, we kind of start there, and then we upgrade it to like, well, actually, we don't have to do that anymore because we have email and instant messaging and everything, and that's what we embrace here to stay in touch.
I noticed that when Fern jolts out of her dream, she has a smartphone in bed with her.
Yes, and she and Arthur call each other on smartphones.
On smartphones. I'm like, are you a 4th grader with a smartphone?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not my decision, but,
I know, I was like side-eyeing the parents there, but they're coordinating this all on their own. They're gonna hatch a plan.
I was a little nervous because in real life, what this is that Ladonna is making the rounds to everybody to say goodbye, and they're all just kind of like, okay, bye, like doing a real casual thing.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh man, thank God it's a cartoon and not real life, because like the timing here has to be absolutely perfect. And there is a good part of the day where Ladonna thinks that her friends don't care about her. And it's like,
yeah, like that could have worked out differently.
Yeah, and it's like if you were off by like a millisecond here, then she would leave and think that you all don't like her. So,
it was a gambit.
It's a children's cartoon. It all works out, but I was a little nervous.
It's anxiety making. Yeah.
So when she's going to say goodbye to everybody, they're all kind of doing odd jobs around people's houses. So like Arthur and Fern are raking the leaves at Arthur's house. Buster is washing his mom's car, and they get paid for what they're doing. And we see everybody arrive to a store called Computer Fun in Muffy's limo. And they all use the money that they got from various odd jobs to buy something. Although Brain didn't do any odd jobs, he was creating the website.
He was doing the hacker stuff.
Which I mean, I agree with Brain. That is a lot of work. That's work on its own. But we don't see what this all is until family's all packed up. They've got it in the U-Haul, and they're ready to go, and Ladonna thinks that all her friends abandoned her, and they all pull up in the limo right in the nick of time. It's all good. So what they did was, first of all, they created a website to stay in touch with Ladonna. They gave her this big present and a bunch of paper in it, and at the end is a little slip of paper that has a URL on it that we don't see. But it is a website where they can stay in touch with Ladonna, including they can leave messages for each other, and there's like an ongoing video chat. They say it like, it's like one of those zoo webcams where they just have them up. You can like, oh, look, it's the baby lions. And just,
or I think they said it has video chat. So I was imagining like Messenger with video chat.
Sure.
Something there's absolutely no need to code from scratch, but okay, sure.
And then the big thing that they all pooled their money together for is that they got her a brand new tablet, which they paid for in cash, by the way.
Crazy. I guess in this universe, maybe a tablet doesn't cost that much, or like there's it's cheap enough that some child labor can easily clear it. I think Muffy's dad helped with that. We're just gonna say, there's no other way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. It leaves Ladonna speechless, which she is rarely speechless, and this is, I mean, Fern says as much as like, just try and stop us from staying in communication. This is
so cute.
This is the proof that Ladonna needed, that she will not be forgotten and that she will be able to stay in touch with them going forward. And this is, it just reiterates that they're all friends and they will remain friends. And so it's a very nice little thing. And the wrap up to the B plot is that DW comes by to give Bud her letter. It's really more of a card. And it says, "Dear Bud, I will miss you. Love, DW." And they give each other a little hug. And
it's very cute.
It is also very cute. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit here. And I will say that in the very last episode of Arthur, as we've talked about this before on Patreon. So if anybody, listeners, if you don't want any spoilers, skip ahead like a minute and a half or something. But DW and Bud meet up again when they are older, and I don't think it's implied that there is a romance there. You certainly could go that way if you want to, but they meet up again as like adults, and they're at least friends again. They remember each other.
That's so cute. And that I've only seen clips of it. I've never seen the episode, but like where they're all grown and they're at the diner together. Yeah.
So it means that somewhere down the line they do see each other again, and Bud leaves Rapti behind intentionally so that way DW will have to write to him. Oh,
a cute little 4-year-old scam.
Yeah.
But like that is love. Like he loves Rapti. Like he loves Rapti. So this is a huge sacrifice for him. Mm-hmm. It's just like him leaving behind his best friend for DW. I thought that was really sweet. If not, maybe that true to life, because in real life, a 4-year-old leaves their lovey, there's going to be HE double hockey sticks to pay. They're not usually like, let me leave this sentimental item for my friend so that she has something to remember me by. But it was really, really cute. And I love the jump ahead at the end.
Yes. So the jump ahead shows the website in action, where Fern and Ladonna are on a video call together, and they're collaborating on the next chapter of The Dirigibles' Daughters. And Fern also gets to meet Ladonna's new friend in Oregon, whose name is Lori. And she has like a pet, like weasel or something?
Yeah, I wasn't a ferret. I wasn't sure.
Yeah, probably ferret. So they become friends, and they continue it on that way. And it is an interesting revisit. Almost a remix. We've said before that there are many episodes that kind of remix different ideas, and this is very much Arthur's faraway friend if it was done today, and it shows that they are still keeping in communication and will be doing so for the future, and it's a very positive way to
months have passed because it's winter.
Yes,
so we see like the seasons changing, and that months and months have passed. It wasn't short term. They're still in touch after all that time.
That's right.
I thought it was very, very sweet. And it reminded me of, because I've also lost touch with many friends over the years.
Yes.
And promised to stay in touch with friends that I didn't stay in touch with. But I've also promised to stay in touch with friends that I did stay in touch with. And it really made me think of my friend that I made at summer camp, Ashley.
Aww. Shout
out to Ashley if you're listening. But we were in summer camp together in grade 6. And that was, 1 week of our lives. Mm-hmm. And we later were in camp together again, as staff members, but we have kept in touch for over 20 years.
Wow.
And we've never lived in the same place, hardly, and we've always been doing different things, but it pays off. It pays off to stay in touch with people and see, have them through seasons of your life. It gives me such, and especially as we're ending this time together, we are with Arthur, we are all going to be imagining the rest of this future together, and you just have to imagine that they're going to have this positive future and stay friends together. And I thought that was so sweet, because it made me think of how they're going to be in each other's lives as adults. I thought it was really, really sweet.
So that's the end of the episode. Let's talk about it kind of as a whole thing. Genna, this is your second time on Elwood City Limits, and we got to really wrap up in terms of where we started, especially with the aspect of military families and everything. But there was that aspect of it, and there was a lot more to talk about. And this was, your main interaction with Ladonna and Bud and these characters, and Fern as well. So what did you think of this? What did you think of this episode? What are your kind of lingering final thoughts about it?
I felt this episode is a little bit heavy.
Mm-hmm.
I think this episode was that the comic moments were really, really needed, because this is like a real emotional thing. And I think for a lot of kids, a separation like this from a friend is one of their first experiences with grief.
Right.
So
yes.
I thought that this was a great way to show that, introduce that, and also to show kids coping with change in a positive way. So even though there's just a lot in this episode, I think it was great. I wouldn't necessarily say that it was the most entertaining or fun episode. What did you think?
While we've been doing these shorter seasons, I've said this before a couple of times, where we've had to pare down our recaps from top 5 episodes to top 3 because there's just not enough episodes to go around. And with the way that things have been going for those last few top 5s, it's like sometimes it's a little bit of a stretch to even get to 5 that we really liked or loved. And so especially with these shorter ones, the pressure is really on for them to deliver if they want to be, top 3 worthy. And, we take them as they are. And we were lucky enough, Lucas and I, in the first episode of season 23, we both enjoyed those stories. So going into this, when I knew that it was the double episode, it was Ladonna and Bud leaving the show. I'm putting quotation marks in here because I've looked ahead and minor spoiler, Bud, this is not the last time we see Bud. Bud's in a couple more, and I think that's just taking advantage of the fact that these are not all in chronological order. It has to be that before they moved, they had these sort of adventures. This is the end of their time in Elwood City, but there's still more stories to tell from when they were still here. That's my guess. Okay. I don't know. I just know that this isn't the last time we see at least Bud. I don't know about Ladonna. So this wasn't I didn't see this as the big grand send-off of these characters that we've had complicated relations with. I would say if this were the last episode, Ladonna is fine. I don't really feel all that strongly about her either way, and I would say that I lightly dislike Bud. But I'm gonna be real with you. I think this is one of the best Arthur episodes ever.
Really? Okay, say more.
Yeah. So I think that the strength of it comes from the fact that it is, as I was talking about it here and watching it, it is kind of a remix of Arthur's Faraway Friend, which is a real memorable episode.
A classic.
Yeah, of course. That is, and that also deals with the trauma of a friend moving away. And that is presented as a very I remember watching that as a kid and crying. So and that music cue that they use in that episode, it still kind of makes me tear up. And so I've kind of figured that well, all right, if we're doing this for Ladonna and Bud, it's not going to be as emotional for me personally. And it isn't. But I think that it really, really worked in terms of what they were trying to say and the way that they chose to say it. Now, as we talked about it here, as we discussed it, there were ways in which the kids went about the matter of the plot that it was all right, well, if they had been a bit more sensible, if they had kind of known to do this, it would have probably worked out better. But of course, they got to make it to 22 minutes. It's got to be an episode of television. So I'm not so tied up with that. And we had to kind of fudge things a little bit with Fern being the in the perspective character.
Yeah.
Which I don't mind at all, because I think I love seeing Fern. I love Fern as a character, and I'm so glad that if we have to establish this from whole cloth, I liked it. I liked the friendship that she and Ladonna have, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And the way that it dealt with all aspects of having a friend move away, especially now, I think that this is Arthur's Faraway Friend, the season 2 episode, definitely could use an update because, as I said before, that is couched in the technology of the late 90s.
Yeah. And
now it's much different. It's actually way, way easier to keep in touch with people that move away. And so that's not to say that the trauma of that happening, the sadness, the grief even, doesn't happen. But it's managed a lot differently, and it can actually be, at least I would think, soothed over a lot. I've had friends who moved away as an adult, and I still keep in touch with them via a Skype call or Twitter DMs or just texting and visiting them when I can. So I still think that they paid a lot of attention to the fact that this is something sad for everybody. And they did it in a way that felt very natural to the way that kids process trauma or can process trauma or grief. Because I have literally done what Ladonna does in this episode. I've just kind of shut down and been yep, this is happening. I'm just going to not feel anything, because if I felt something, then it would really, really hurt. And I don't want to do that. And it's just well observed is the phrase I keep coming back to, because in this episode, there were so many moments where I'm just they feel like real kids. They feel like real kids doing this. And I loved that.
A lesser show wouldn't have that Ladonna shut down, her putting on this flat affect, her pushing those emotions down and putting on a front. And like that just requires a little bit of like complex emotional reasoning to understand as you're watching. So like it's introducing kids gently to concepts like suppressing your emotions, and like a lesser show just would have had her be sad and be crying. Instead she does this multi-layered thing, and I thought that was really, really interesting. And then we find out that it's a result of this past trauma,
and we see that reaction as well through, like, I thought it was actually a really great decision to have DW cry about it right away instead of, because I think the natural thing would be to build it up to the climax where, like, when everybody's leaving and then you cry and that's the sad part. But the episode wasn't about leaving you with the sadness that a friend is leaving. It's about wrestling through those feelings and then finding out ways where you can still be friends going forward. And that's what everybody really wants. I just thought that this really worked so well. And I was floored because I'm used to Arthur in this very late stage getting to a certain level of quality and not really beyond that.
Yeah.
I think that there are a lot of Arthur episodes that we've watched recently, even just like the ones we watched in the last episode, where it's like, these are good, but they don't touch early season Arthur. And for me, it was like, I don't think they can get there again. And I think it's unrealistic of me to expect that. And then this one totally took me by surprise. I think it also helps that it's a double episode, so they have twice the length to kind of deal with all of this stuff, and it gets the appropriate time to breathe. And there's not a lot of, like, silly stuff. There's not a lot of comedy. As you said, there's, like, lesser moments of... But I think it's also, you said it was a heavy episode. I felt that it was respectful to this kind of experience. Yeah. And because I think that Lucas and I have seen all the ways in which newer episodes of Arthur can, like, get a bit too jokey. It can get a bit too, like, aping other popular cartoon shows. And when Arthur doesn't try to be itself,
pop culture references that are going to be dated and they're cheesy. Yeah,
this is so Arthur because it's dealing with something that happened, like social education is what I always like to say with Arthur, and then it's talking about this specific situation that most kids will have to deal with, and showing you that it's not so insurmountable, even though it is sad, and it's okay to feel sad about it. And they're not even saying that to you directly. You watch this episode and you internalize a lot of what it's trying to say. And, like, I can't ask for better than that from an Arthur episode. No, and it's
a great way to practice and to understand this, because this is something all kids are going to go through. Virtually all kids are going to go through. Yeah.
And I really can't ask for better than that. It was I thought it was a really enjoyable episode. I never thought that a Ladonna and Bud episode would please me to this degree. So when I say that it's one of the best Arthur episodes, what I mean is that I'm going to couch that a little bit. Would it hold up to my personal favorites? I don't know about that. But I will say that for this era of Arthur, the end of Arthur, #, the end of Arthur, this is one of the best episodes that I've seen in all of these episodes, all of these seasons for a long time. And this is, no spoilers, this is going to be in my top 3, no question. And it's so vindicating in a way, because at times when we go through these later seasons of Arthur and we're just like, well, we're already here, let's kind of keep going, there's like almost like a feeling of obligation of like, we're in it for
it's a slog. Like, it becomes a slog.
It can become a slog, especially when we encounter episodes that are like either bad or just okay. And I did begin to feel like I don't think Arthur has it anymore. And then episodes like this comes along and it's like, no, the people who made this great are still there. We're still there at the time that they were making this. It's still possible to make great episodes of Arthur, and there may be more just around the corner. Like, we just have to keep going, and that really, really gave me great hope for the remainder of this project, and I'm very, very happy with what I saw here. So I'm just, I'm very, very pleased that this
I feel
came together.
very
the way it did.
lucky and honored that I got to watch this good episode. I also really feel like one of the things that made it great was that there's evident respect for the tradition and the canon of Arthur in this. That this episode is in conversation with Arthur's faraway friend.
Yes.
Like, this is really, like, it's integrating the lore from that time, but also updating it for this modern audience, that kids watching Arthur's faraway friend, they could sort of understand intellectually, oh, they can't stay in touch, they have to send postcards, but that's not their experience anymore. So kids could definitely get something out of that episode, but this new episode is true to the heart of Arthur, which is like showing this empathy, showing real life kids and their real life struggles, but also pushing that forward, making it a little bit more contemporary.
Yeah. It's updating the show in a way that feels more natural than an episode we had recently where the Arthur kids were like, "What's an encyclopedia? What's a floppy disk?" And it's just like, no, we are speaking to the children of today with an evergreen concept that we're just updating for the way that kids understand communication today. It's like, I have no problem with that. I think that's great.
No, and I think it almost like it absolutely all these kids are going to be familiar with talking on like FaceTime or Skype or Teams or whatever to family members, friends that live far away. And this also gives them a great idea, which is to like create a story with your friend. It's one of my favorite things to do. I still do this as adults, like writing a story with a friend who lives far away. It is so fun, so fulfilling to go back and look at it, and like writing or making stories together, telling stories together as like a friendship building, like generative, positive community building activity. It really hit my writer heart really hard too. I thought that was beautiful.
Well, Genna, I'm really glad that you could join me for this. I didn't expect for this to be as positive as it is. Like, don't get me wrong, listeners. Like, the first thing that I'm going to message Lucas when we're done is, you have to watch this episode.
Yeah.
Like I kind of joked before that, like, oh, Lucas, you can skip the Ladonna episode, ha ha ha. But it's like,
no way.
He's got to see this. He's got to see this, and I'm gonna try to do everything I can to make sure that he does watch this, because I would think that this would probably end up on his end of the season list as well. But that's the end of that episode. And Genna, again, I'm really thankful that you could be here for this. I think that this was a really good one to show somebody whose experience with Arthur is, I mean, you would have seen something at least recently, and you've been keeping up with the podcast, but definitely this would be one that I would be able to show practically any person with any familiarity with Arthur, which again is a mark for its quality. And you yourself are a podcaster too, as we begin to end off the episode here. And you are farther along in your podcast project than when I would have spoken to you a few months ago. Give us an update on your podcast, which is Pages Past, and which people can subscribe to right now and support.
Yes, absolutely. I have a podcast coming out later this fall. It's called Pages Past. On each episode, I invite a guest on, and together we read a book of that guest's choice, something that was meaningful to them in their far past and that they haven't revisited in a really long time. And together we have a conversation about it. We read it through a theme. We do some close reading, and we just make some meaning out of something that meant a lot to them when they were a totally different person. You will be able to hear your favorite, Will Young, in the trailer of this show, which is up now. It's available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and anywhere you get your podcast. You also can sign up for my free Patreon to hear when we're going to drop new episodes. So it's patreon.com/pagespast. And I've taped a whole bunch of episodes since the last time I was on this podcast. And some of you may be aware of the podcast The Newest Olympian, which is with Mike Schubert. It's a Percy Jackson podcast. I've been on that show a few times, and I've also stolen Mike Schubert to be on my show. He chose to revisit Holes by Louis Sachar, a book that a lot of you probably have a strong emotional connection to. And if you don't mind shouting out, I don't know if you have any listeners in Toronto, but I'm going to be in a show with Mike Schubert in Toronto. A Newest Olympian episode that is going to be taped live in Toronto on October 5th, I want to say. Now that I'm saying that, I'm like, oh God, when is it? And that's around the time when those first episodes will start dropping. You can also follow the show on Instagram. That's what is updated the most frequently. Instagram.com/pagespast.
Yes, and we've put you on the Elwood City Limits Instagram stories before, and we will continue to, because I'm really excited to hear. I mean, I've already heard an episode. I was in one, but I'm excited to hear what else is coming up for Pages Past in terms of what other episodes are coming and what the final product sounds like. Because I mean, folks who listen to this show, you're used to podcasts sounding this way. Genna has put and will put so much work into her show. From what I've heard of it and from what you can hear on the trailer, it sounds fantastic. Like, I think it's really, really terrific production, and I'm excited to dive into it more.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited, and I'm really soon going to have a post up on my Patreon and on my social media about the books that we're going to be covering and the guests that I'm going to have on, and I really hope it's going to be some people that you may be familiar with. And I would love to hear from you if you're interested in the show, have any thoughts or suggestions. And thank you so much, Will. I hope that I have high production, but I am learning. I am a new podcaster, so I'm figuring it out as I go. But I'm so excited to hopefully share this with some of your audience.
Well, and I think that a lot of our listeners will be very interested to hear where you go from here. So make sure that you're following Genna Buck and Pages Past, and especially looking out for those episodes coming very soon. And that's going to do it for this episode of Elwood City Limits. My name's Will Young, and for Genna Buck,
put friends first to make friends last. That's something we say at Camp Comelec, where I met my lifetime friends, and the lesson that I think Ladonna and Bud learned in this episode.
We'll see you next time.
See you next time.